Okay, so let's talk about Q&A on Monday, 20th of June. I believe that was the date. We had our esteemed Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull on, and he gave what seemed to be a very strong performance. He is quite charismatic, he is eloquent, he is well spoken, and he carries himself very well, and he's very knowledgeable. But I don't know, he seemed to win over the audience, and he got applause lines on several occasions, even when he didn't even answer the question. In fact, he would just go into a canned, stock reply that obviated the actual point of the question. So, the absolute biggest issues of this election for me were all brought up at the Q&A by people in the audience, and those issues are the economy, of course. That's most people's number one priority. I'm not going to say it's my number one priority, but it's obviously a big thing. There is asylum seekers and refugees, which is a huge issue for many people. It has been an issue for a long time, and actually I think both of the major parties are wrong on this issue. The NBN is another massive issue, I believe, for Australia today. And for me personally, the number one issue is climate change. And Malcolm Turnbull had 4 different questions to address all of these issues, and I think he gave the absolute worst response he could possibly have done to each of them. Well, absolute worst is overstating it a bit, but he was way off the mark. He didn't answer the questions correctly, and I don't know, it was kind of shameful and disgraceful, especially climate change. So the biggest one, this is the biggest topic, the greatest danger there is to the planet at the moment, and the largest political issue for me at this upcoming election. And the Liberal Party has set the lowest, or has as their policy, their official policy, the lowest rates for carbon emission reductions. And Malcolm Turnbull, first of all, he took a play out of Hillary Clinton's playbook by hiding behind Barack Obama, saying received a phone call from Barack Obama and he congratulated me. And it's a wonderful thing that the Paris Agreement was achieved, but Australia's, at least the Liberal Party's, goals for carbon emission reduction is just too low compared to some other countries and compared to where we should be. I mean, I think we should be leading the world in climate change and in reductions of emissions, and it seems like Malcolm Turnbull and the Liberal Party want to do the bare minimum that they can do without losing any kind of political capital. Whereas the Labour Party and the Greens go much, much further, and I think they are correct on that issue. And I think it's kind of a disgrace that the worst part about Malcolm Turnbull's response was how he just talked about, in the future, our goals will be increased higher, so we will get our emission reductions down further. But for now, we have these very modest goals. Well, if you know that they're going to have to be increased in the future, why don't you take responsibility for that? And why don't you match the Labour Party or go so far as the Greens, God forbid, in how you actually intend to battle climate change? That's the biggest issue for me. But I think, he was asked about trickle-down economics, and a questioner asked him, there's all these negative aspects of trickle-down. A lot of the money will be going overseas. A lot of the money will be going to the top 1%. We won't necessarily be seeing it at the bottom. So, what is the point of trickle-down economics? And Malcolm Turnbull just doubled down on the trickle-down. He didn't answer her questions. He didn't address the money going overseas. He didn't address the money going to the incredibly wealthy. He just doubled down and said, we need to lower the tax rate on these businesses, and over the next 12 years we're going to continue lowering them on bigger and bigger corporations so that the economy can continue to grow. He answered a question about the negatives of trickle-down economics by describing what trickle-down economics was. And, that's kind of insulting to people's intelligence. Refugees and asylum seekers, both parties are terribly negligent on this fact, I think. Australian government has been committing, or otherwise has been complicit to, human rights violations for decades now, and it's disgusting what's going on in these centres. And Malcolm Turnbull turned the question from human rights abuses or violations to border protection, as though Australia doesn't have the infrastructure to handle, a modest amount of refugees and asylum seekers from these terrible places. Particularly, I know it's a really tough topic with refugees from Syria, for example. But, I mean, these people are fleeing for their lives, and I think Australia has more than enough infrastructure. And if we planned everything correctly, we would be able to integrate these people into society. And currently, it costs us over $1 billion a year, at least as of 2014, more to offshore process refugees and asylum seekers than to do it onshore. Whereas to simply bring them ashore, process them, give them welfare, they would be able to contribute to the economy. They could start small businesses, they could get jobs, be employed, and culturally enrich our society and contribute. Whereas right now we're just running these, as the questioner on QandA said, concentration camps. And it's a disgusting issue, and I think it's terrible that we're complicit in these human rights violations. And of course, there was the NBN question. Now this is the major infrastructure project of Australia at the moment, and Malcom Turnbull was asked. The question was, given that countries overseas have implemented your plan and have had to dig up the cables and rebuild the whole network again at the cost of the taxpayer, can you assure us that we won't need to be doing that in the future? And instead of answering that question, Malcom Turnbull said, look, it is the Liberal Party has done it cheaper and faster than Labor would have done. That's what he said. He just went into a stock speech blaming Labor and claiming that they're doing a better job. He didn't address the fact that this technology is already outdated before it's even been laid into the ground. And it will have to be dug up, and it will have to be replaced in the future when our infrastructure needs are greater. And this is why Labor and the Greens are both better on this policy. Labor wants to take the existing infrastructure and do as much fibre to the premise as possible, whereas the Greens ideally would like to dig up what's been done and replace it all with fibre to the premises. I guess either, it would be up to each person to decide which one would be more worthwhile. I was absolutely in favour of the original fibre optic rollout plan to the premise from the very beginning, and I think the Labor slogan of "do it once, do it right" is correct. And I think, I don't know, Malcom Turnbull just absolutely bungled all of those questions, and he received applause for a lot of his responses, even though he completely circumvented the nature of the question and didn't actually have to address the real issues. He just went on the stump, and somebody has to call him out on that, because I haven't seen it in any of the media that I've seen. And so, yeah, I guess it's time for new media to call people out on this stuff. You'll be getting more videos like this, so comment below and let's have a conversation.